Well, friends, under a cloak of secrecy, with no opinion, no rationale, and no support in the law, 6 justices of the Supreme Court overturned what a trial court judge did, what appellate court judges did, and those 6 justices just gave the green light to Donald Trump to close the Department of Education, even though the Constitution provides that only Congress can establish or shut down an executive branch agency, a department of the federal government. Fortunately for us all and for history, Justice Sotomayor wrote a dissenting opinion exposing the unconstitutionality, the lawlessness of what those 6 justices just did. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, we continue to live amidst the Trump-induced darkness and lawlessness as facilitated by 6 members of the Supreme Court. Because without even bothering to author an opinion, the Supreme Court said Donald Trump can continue to tear down, shut down, terminate the Department of Education, even though he lacks the constitutional authority to do so. So let's start with the new reporting, and then we're going to have a close look at the critically important dissenting opinion authored by Justice Sotomayor as joined by Justices Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson. But first, here's the new reporting. This from NPR. Headline: Supreme Court says Trump's efforts to close the Education Department can continue. And that article begins, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled Monday that it would allow the Trump administration to resume dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. The court stayed or paused a preliminary injunction issued in May by a federal judge in Massachusetts. That injunction had directed the Trump administration to stop gutting the Department of Education and to reinstate many of the nearly 1,400 workers the government had laid off. Monday's ruling is not the final word as the case continues to work its way through the lower courts, but it deals a serious blow to the states and school districts who had filed suit and who worry that, without an injunction, much of the damage done to the Department of Education before a final ruling will be impossible to reverse. The court's decision was unsigned, and the majority did not explain its thinking. Justice Sonia Sotomayor did offer a sharp dissent, saying the decision is indefensible and that it hands the executive, the president, the power to repeal statutes by firing all those necessary to carry them out. The majority of the Supreme Court, the 6 justices, the majority is either willfully blind to the implications of its ruling or naive, but either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is grave. A department without enough employees to perform statutorily mandated functions is not a department at all, Judge June, the trial court judge, wrote in May. This court cannot be asked to cover its eyes while the department's employees are continuously fired and units are transferred out until the Department of Education becomes a shell of itself. On June 4, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit agreed with Judge June's assessment that the deep staffing cuts have made it effectively impossible for the Department of Education to carry out its statutory functions. Now, friends, a word about Justice Sotomayor's dissent, and I hope you'll bear with me because I want to read a good portion of it. It's 19 pages long. I'm not going to read the entire dissent. But Justice Sotomayor has been writing compelling dissenting opinions, one after another, exposing how the right-wing six-justice majority are not just excusing Donald Trump's lawlessness and unconstitutionality, but embracing it. You know, Justice Sotomayor's dissents could each serve as a chapter in a history book entitled Why American Democracy Fell. But let's fight to make sure that book never gets written. And I'll talk in a few minutes about how we can fight to make sure that book never gets written. But first, let's go through a good bit of Justice Sotomayor's dissent in the case of Linda McMahon, Secretary of Education et al. And others versus New York and others. Justice Sotomayor, with whom Justice Kagan and Justice Jackson join dissenting. This case arises out of the president's unilateral efforts to eliminate a cabinet-level agency established by Congress nearly half a century ago, the Department of Education. As Congress mandated, the department plays a vital role in this nation's education system, safeguarding equal access to learning and channeling billions of dollars to schools and students across the country each year. Only Congress has the power to abolish the Department of Education. The executive, the president's task, by contrast, is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Yet, by executive fiat, the president ordered the Secretary of Education to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education. When the executive, the president, publicly announces his intent to break the law and then executes on that promise, it is the judiciary's duty to check that lawlessness, not expedite it. Two lower courts rose to the occasion, preliminarily enjoining the mass firings while the litigation remains ongoing. Rather than maintaining the status quo, however, this court, the right-wing six-justice bloc, this court now intervenes, lifting the injunction and permitting the government, the Trump administration, to proceed with dismantling the Department of Education. That decision is indefensible. It hands the executive, the president, the power to repeal statutes by firing all those necessary to carry them out. The majority is either willfully blind to the implications of its ruling or naive, but either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is grave. Unable to join in this misuse of our emergency docket, I respectfully dissent. And friends, have you ever asked yourself why Donald Trump is so desperate to kill the Department of Education and deprive schools and students nationwide of the funding and the programs provided by DOE? Here are some of the reasons. Congress tasked the agency, the Department of Education, with administering a broad range of educational programs. For example, the department runs the federal student financial aid system. Congress has also charged the Department of Education with ensuring equal access to education. The department's Office of Civil Rights, for example, enforces several anti-discrimination laws as to federally funded educational programs. The department additionally administers the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which funds and supports special education services for more than 7 million students with disabilities. In fact, tens of millions of low-income families to rely on financial assistance programs administered by the Department of Education. Programs to help students who need financial aid. Programs to provide equal access to education for all. Programs supporting anti-discrimination laws. Programs supporting individuals with disabilities. Programs supporting low-income families and students. You still wonder why Donald Trump wants to shutter the Department of Education? Friends, let's finish up where Justice Sotomayor finishes up. The Department of Education is responsible for providing critical funding and services to millions of students and scores of schools across the country. Lifting the district court's injunction will unleash untold harm, delaying or denying educational opportunities and leaving students to suffer from discrimination, sexual assault, and other civil rights violations without the federal resources Congress intended. The majority, the six-justice majority, apparently deems it more important to free the government from paying employees it had no right to fire than to avert these very real harms while the litigation continues. Equity does not support such an inequitable result. The president must take care that the laws are faithfully executed, not set out to dismantle them. That basic rule undergirds our Constitution's separation of powers, yet today, the majority rewards clear defiance of that core principle with emergency relief. Because I cannot condone such abuse of our equitable authority, I respectfully dissent. So, friends, does Donald Trump's lawlessness, as supported and enabled by his 6 Supreme Court justices, anger you? Does depriving services to disabled students infuriate you? Does inflicting suffering on low-income, underprivileged kids, students, piss you the fuck off? Me too. So what say we turn our anger into action? July 17 is our next nationwide rally, march, protest. And like Justice Sotomayor, I dissent. I'll be out there on the 17th, and can I urge each and every one of you to get out there if you are able, stand up, stay strong, speak out, march, rally, protest, dissent. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.